I wanted to make this video 6 months ago, but like Doctor Strange in a time loop is Dormammu, I kept coming back to the beer bottle. And now finally, I'm here to talk about Cyberpunk, a genre that, much like my motivation, keeps dying and coming back with impressive regularity. This genre has been called dead, which means that those who produce Cyberpunk games and anime are trying to profit off the dead, just like mediums who prey on desperate people. Sure, everything related to Cyberpunk is intellectual, thought-provoking pieces, but let's be honest, lately I've been more into isekai harem anime where the main character's biggest problem is choosing which half-naked girl to hang out with next. But I collected my thoughts and noticed something. Let's imagine it's 1982. We're watching what many call the first Cyberpunk film in history, Blade Runner. But our modern, curious eyes can't help but notice something that no one questioned back then. If this is the first Cyberpunk film and it's American, then what is a geisha doing on a billboard? The thing is, William Gibson was writing his first Cyberpunk novel at the time, the one that becomes the gold standard of the genre, and he also thought it was strange. Could it really be plagiarism? But that was a mistake, because Blade Runner has already started production back in 1980. And Gibson understood, no one had stolen his work, it was just a coincidence. They created the same thing at the same time, based on what they had seen on screen from other people. And they weren't alone. Across the ocean on the Japanese archipelago, Katsuhiro Otomo was releasing the first cyberpunk manga, Akira, and that also happened in 1982. A genre that wouldn't even get its name for another 4 years suddenly appeared like a flash, at the same time among people who didn't know each other and lived on opposite sides of the planet. And this image was almost the same, there was something Japanese in it.
What the fuck?
In the early 80s, three authors were writing what could be called neo-science fiction noir. Science fiction before them saw only progress, while the USA kept spiraling into hell. The present promised nothing good about the future, and so dirt and disappointment entered sci-fi along with a grim protagonist. In 1980s, the crime rate in the United States was at an all-time height. The local economy was collapsing, and other countries were breathing down America's neck. Every American family wanted a Japanese VCR player, and anyone who had been to Tokyo described it as a leap into the future. The tech race was clearly lost. Japan was already building real robots. And then there it is. That geisha on the screen showing that in the world of the future it's Japan that leads. All this technology feels foreign. And that's where the key difference lies. The irony is that America created cyberpunk, a genre that reflects its fear of the future. But Japan bites into cyberpunk, understands it much deeper, because it has something to say. Akira, Ghost in the Shell, each a step toward a globally recognizable brand, with a million references. And then for some reason Japan took revenge on its fans, killing and burying the entire genre in just a few anime. And in this video we'll feel how art can sense the catastrophe looming over a country. Welcome to the biography of anime cyberpunk. Japan after the war. It became an economic miracle and the best place on the planet. But no matter how much of a paradise you imagine, there are always problems, rebellious teenagers. A generation was born in Japan that knew nothing but endless economic growth and a constantly improving quality of life. Just listen to the track that opens Burst City, the ultimate teen cult film. This thing doesn't even have a plot, just chaotic sense of street bikers, gangs and police. Pure punk energy. And now it's 1982. There's no real anime, just light entertainment that barely airs on TV. So, even if someone somehow raised the money for a dark dystopia, how exactly were they planning to make that money back? Let me give you an example. It will take another 3 years before Dirty Pair hits television. This is a kind of pleasure I, as a grown man, should be ashamed of. Intergalactic Scooby-Doo, woman in skin-tight latex with noisy cricket guns straight out of Men in Black. Will Smith is 188 cm tall. Makes you wonder how many times this Dark Tower has broken the gunslinger's creed. Like I do not aim with the noisy cricket, he who aim with the noisy cricket has forgotten the face of... I'm sorry, Schizophrenia main crossover sponsor. A bizarre fusion of Wild West and Cowboy Bebop without heavy stuff, and I'm not bringing it up by accident. Dirty Pair shamelessly flirts not just with its horny teen audience but also with cyberpunk themes. One of the earliest mentions of AI, one of the first iconic cyberpunk cities, and yet it tanked so hard in the ratings that they didn't even bother in airing the final few episodes. So at that time there wasn't really anything truly dark in anime. And where could you find it then? Exactly in manga, but also in a brand new format invented by Mamoru Oshii, the OVA, original video animation. That's where the very first OVA ever came out, Dallos. Cyberpunk that could actually make money thought the booming video rental market, and without worrying about TV ratings. Enjoy the best things in life. Stuff like hentai, violence, and philosophy. The OVA perfectly filled the gap of what television couldn't deliver. And after Doji Perry was pulled from the air, it was successfully transferred to VHS, where it later had a couple of reboots. And look at this, we've gone through all these complex economic, cultural structures and prerequisites in just 3 years. And only here, in 1985, did the Japanese industry mature enough for a legendary creator to release some complete nonsense which doesn't resemble Cyberpunk at all, but which later becomes the foundation for the legendary The Matrix. Megazone 23, Part 1, The Future, everything is perfect. Everything that Japan really saw in itself. A stable economy, happy people, and according to the canon, the main character is a biker who causes trouble for fun. He accidentally stole from the government a robot motorcycle mecha with an AI supercomputer cute girl. It's hard for me to even say this in one breath. Then the creators just try to hit the 18+ rating and show a couple of decent action scenes. We find out that all of this is not real. All humanity is trapped in an illusion on a spaceship, and the Earth is experiencing the end of the world. And here are immediately 2 references, a shot inspired by Blade Runner and a precursor to the future Matrix. We wondered why Japan so easily embraces the foreign, grim cyberpunk genre. The very first work in this style gives an unpredictable and prophetic answer. Americans feared the heavy future because of their heavy present. The Japanese feared the future because their present was too good. Megazone showed a utopia that was just a shiny wrapper, hiding a terrible crisis. This perfect story was built on a big lie, like the performance of a second-rate comedian. But if you know the history of Japan, you'll understand that the fear was quite justified. But before that moment comes, let's wait a few more years. To call it cyberpunk will only be thought of later by Americans. What is unfolding here and now is a completely different genre, for which there is no suitable word. And everyone just decided to call it Japanese cyberpunk, what began with Katsuhiro Otomo. Because here too there is fear of technology, there is also social strain. And in future tones manga will look back over its shoulder and recall the aesthetics of Blade Runner. But this is something else. A year later, in '86, the second Megazone tape came out and completely blew up the video rental market. The first part was originally made for TV, so its plot was a bit choppy and the color palette was bright, but the second one was boldly made darker. Yasuomi Umetsu, a well-known director and artist, completely changed the character design. The city looked like the grim street of Robocop, while the character designs were closer to Akira. And the first 40 minutes are basically one non-stop action scene. The plot itself hasn't even started yet. It's just a demonstration of a gang trying to break through the government's defenses to reach the supercomputer. Of course, the space battles in robo-suits should have been called something like Mecha Punk, but Megazone was part of the process, following earlier works and continuing to shape the future of the genre. And honestly, it's hard to prove, but some sources say that this very tape became the first pirated cyberpunk recording in the United States, sold with an amateur, cartoonish fun translation. Like this video.
I'm in control of your mind. No, you're not.
That suggests America was already paying attention to Japan, while Japan had been exploring this genre for 5 years and was ready to take it to the next level. Bubblegum Crisis. And here it is. The first anime that decided to do everything the right way, to steal from everyone, East and West alike, and throw it all into one glorious pile. The greatness of Bubblegum Crisis hits you right from the opening, and here we see the first true foundation of what would later become Cyberpunk 2077. We watch the police fight synthetic humans who, still not quite by the rules of the genre, begin to develop their own consciousness. They demand money, helicopters, your wife, maybe even start planning their own political party. This is just my guess. And who's behind it all? Of course, the corporations, sitting smugly in their pyramids. Meanwhile, the local bounty hunter in her colorful robo-suit. Well, that's it. I don't need to add anything. Bubblegum Crisis really does have it all. And this is where Japanese cyberpunk starts to stand apart its American counterpart. Here there is room for joyful everyday moments. And the animation captures mechanical chaos in a way no live action film of the time with all its clunky CGI could ever pull off. So in the end, this vision of the genre feels richer, more layered. Even William Gibson himself admit he wasn't writing sci-fi. He called it fantastic surrealism. Here's another fun detail. In American cyberpunk everyone's loner. But in Japanese cyberpunk it's not just the evil corporations that matter. The police do too. And these aren't corrupt, broken cops. Not NPC. They're portrayed as people who actually stand up for humanity. Clear-headed, optimistic, believing in kindness and justice. Respect. But to sum it up, the genre at this point had everything. Expect real reflection and a clear message. So, the Japanese take on cyberpunk was better, but also a little dumber. Bubblegum Crisis would continue until 1991, growing sharper, darker, more cybernetic with every installment. For 5 years Japan was crawling towards this uncertain masterpiece. Yes, the neon cities looked incredible, but we wanted bikers. The giant computers? Great, but please keep the fanservice in check. Piece by piece.
Brick by brick!
Their vision of cyberpunk came together like a puzzle. Japan wanted cyberpunk desperately, but didn't quite know how to sell it to itself. And then came Bubblegum Crisis, screaming its fear of the future under rock music. Brilliant. But think about how much more brilliant Blade Runner is when you release it basically just flipped through some comics and created this. Stage 1. Formation. The genre begins shaping itself through countless variations, some brilliant, some absolutely unhinged. The process is simple. If it's a hit, great. If it bombs, throw it in the trash. In Japan, cyberpunk spent 4 years asking itself, what the hell am I, really? And when it finally figured it out, it just killed itself. And outside of Bubblegum Crisis, the field kept growing. The predecessor to the Persona game series, Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Story. A tale about a pair of high schoolers who summon a demon through a computer? Yeah. He just created a program that eventually plunged the world into chaos. Then Robot Carnival. A massive anthology with directors including the very author of Akira. By the way, the correct way to say it's Akira, but even the Japanese themselves sometimes pronounce it with a different accent. And Neo Tokyo, where a humble construction worker tries to negotiate with robots. Yes, also with Kazuhiro Otomo on board.
Oh no, not again.
You can feel it, right? He's clearly building up to something. But we'll get to that a bit later. And then there's Dominion Tank Police. And this one I adore. The animation, the insane characters, the sheer uniqueness. It feels like nothing else. The setup. A post-apocalyptic world where healthy people are a myth. Everyone breathes poisonous fumes. And crime is so rampant they had to create a police division that literally rides around in tanks. Surely the cops will be reasonable, rational, right?
Come out, I said, and take what's coming. Come and get ready to die!
Well, kind of. And they're up against an equally absurd terrorist. Also, there's plenty of fanservice. Thank, I guess. But the truth is, Dominion is kind of a failed piece of cyberpunk. It never became a massive franchise, because even at the time it already felt retro. But despite that, it still got a proper sequel. Meanwhile, cyberpunk was already moving toward realism and seriousness. So Appleseed got more attention. Everything we've seen up to this point were experiments in different directions. But then comes Appleseed, This wasn't just an experiment anymore, but a full-on cyberpunk vision through a utopian lens. In this world, a hyper-advanced AI governs the state. Robots outperform humans at everything. And no, they don't start a revolution. The setting has plenty of Blade Runner flavor. Yes, I know, I keep bringing it up. But fine, I swear, this is the last time. It's driving me insane. Anyway, Appleseed predict Ghost in the Shell by 7 years. Almost beat for beat. But don't overhype it. The industry was still fumbling around, trying to find the core of its message. What is memorable is the antagonist's motivation. In a flawless world, he simply asked, "What should I even do? I already have everything." In fact, the film opens with his wife throwing herself out of a window, because she feels like a bird in a golden cage. And the husband? He becomes a terrorist. Fun times. Take note, this is the second time the Japanese have feared their own utopia. It didn't inspire them, it terrified them. And that fear turned out to be justified. And then came 1988. Anime utopia was reaching its peak, fitting since utopia itself was becoming a tangible reality in Japan. Until 1990 hit, and the bubble burst. Budgets got slashed in half, and from then on Japan would never again be quite as wealthy or as globally influential as it was in that golden moment. Cyberpunk has just discovered its true motif, but that motif immediately led it to death. The genre, like the country itself, had to adapt, collapse, and be reborn. And the one who would kill it and complete the cycle was the very man who had been preparing, contributing, shaping the whole time. They poured so many resources into Akira that, honestly, it was impossible to recap. Multiple studios worked on production, yet Akira flopped at the box office. But the result looks so damn cool. This animation still outshines even modern anime. They created 160,000 unique frames for this movie. 160,000, you know? Akira looks phenomenal, especially for its time. But here's the thing, dear Mr. Otomo, as much as you jumped above your own head in terms of visuals, you ignored how the genre has been shifting all these years. Instead, you dragged cyberpunk right back to its roots. It's still a story about a biker thrown into a conflict much bigger than himself. But because entire manga volumes were compressed into just a couple of hours, Akira leaves you with this strange feeling. How the hell is this anime so huge? But why my timer says only 2 hours? Still, this was the first cyberpunk anime to reach America. And yet, the whole mecha biker aesthetic had to go. Japan's economy was collapsing. Japanese cyberpunk died with it. But the death solved 1,000 problems at once. Remember how I said they were painfully trying to understand themselves? Forget it. Problem solved by American democracy. Welcome to the stage 2, Popularization. And now begins the race to see who can make it look the coolest. Megazone 23, Part 3. Funnily enough, Megazone is ahead again. No longer about bikers, but now about a respected hacker, 1,000 years into the future, lost in a virtual reality. Just 4 years later. But it already feels like something from a completely different universe. But we've told enough about you, Megazone. What interests us here is something else. Midnight Eye Goku. What the hell are you? An anime that feels like an American trashy action flick. A detective dressed like a male stripper suddenly gets a cyber eye from a mysterious stranger, an eye that lets him hack literally any device. And this stick... What is this stuff? How does it relate to cyberpunk at all? And why is the antagonist a prostitute motorcycle hybrid with a robot dwarf riding on her back? I volunteered to guide you through this genre, but at this point even I don't understand anymore. Here comes the big point of the trend cyberpunk in every home. The year 1994. The most successful franchise dropped its most successful OVA, Macross Plus. Fighter jet battles, experimental 3D graphics, and an AI with a red eye that's absolutely not hinting at anything. And Macross Plus doesn't even care about cyberpunk. It's got its own vibe entirely. He just uses familiar tropes as a tool. Maybe you noticed, but we just skipped a whole 4 years. Simply because nothing more canonical in cyberpunk happened. Even our beloved Katsuhiro Otomo started ditching cyberpunk as a whole genre. He was only interested in taking the tech bits from it. And he releases a solid, well put together work, Roujin Z. A good story about how people use technology to extend the lives of the elderly. Or maybe just to get rid of them. Of course, there are a couple of Otomo-style twists, but it's really just a small story. One that's hard to call a major piece of cyberpunk. That's why Battle Angel quietly made its way to the screen, and even onto the western stage. It got so deep into the minds of fans that James Cameron spent over a decade trying to adapt it. And yet all we had at the time were 2 half-hour episodes, drawn for who knows whom. But in Japan's box office, no jackpot. This general loss of interest also means that almost nobody back home noticed the story of a policewoman wondering whether she was human or just a machine. And yes, you thought of Armitage. Alright. Yes, you also thought of Ghost in the Shell. The thing is, Armitage is very similar, but Armitage was way more export focused. It borrowed straight from European American culture and cliches. But honestly, still awesome. I recommend it. It didn't bring anything new to the genre, but if you just want something to chill with for the evening, it's perfect. Ghost in the Shell. Okay, let's pick our words carefully here and show some respect. This is a classic. The heroine fights terrorists and realizes that an AI inside the net has achieved self-awareness as a full-fledged mind. They made her a bit different from the manga version, but that was for the best. She grabbed even more attention that way. A future where technology has advanced so far that people can replace any organ. They are connected to the internet and communicate through the network, almost as if by sheer thought. In Japan, Ghost in the Shell didn't become popular, because it basically ditched its original source. But Shiro was thinking in terms of franchises. He wrote a massive lore on purpose, so other creators could expand his universe. And one of those creators was none other than Mamoru Oshii. Yep, him again, along with many other insanely talented directors. Their attention to detail and visual effects were just the cherry on top. And it's from here that the Wachowski brothers, or sisters depending on which timeline you prefer, imported the essentials: slow-mo, camera pans, and those green digital numbers. The historical value of this anime as cyberpunk is in the directing. It's a story you see, you want to see, and you're satisfied with it. Oshii's directing already gave Ghost in the Shell its push back in 1985, when he created Angel's Egg, a super cryptic philosophical film almost impossible to comprehend. And it's exactly this philosophical side that made Ghost in the Shell so precious. A year later, cyberpunk as a commercial product in Japan was completely done. Like, come on, even Ghost in the Shell flopped, so what are we even talking about? And instead of Ghost in the Shell, society was fascinated by Evangelion, which came out around the same time. Surprisingly, people are still in awe of it even today. Thought for me it kind of passed me by. Stage 3. Niche. Cyberpunk lost the mainstream, only the diehards stuck around. A new wave of authors weren't making cyberpunk as a trend anymore. They were making it as a dead genre, meant only for other fans, like themselves. And you had to bring something nobody had shown before. Experiments Lain. Lain is insanely niche, but insanely powerful in the context of anime cyberpunk. It starts like a normal school story. One girl commits suicide and then starts sending emails. Little Lain gets a new computer, and is shown what the internet is. Eventually, it's more science fiction than cyberpunk, but it studies the structures of reality itself, way ahead of its time. Honestly, I was rewatching it while working on this video and thought, damn, yeah, that's pretty much how it is. The essence of Lain, it's a visualization of thought constructs, reflection, a puzzle anime. You need to prepare yourself for several rewatches in a row. Malice Doll. The protagonist is a prostitute doll who becomes a real woman, straight up Pinocchio style. She runs through grim neon streets, swearing like crazy. The plot is pure chaos, Immortal twists, bizarre monsters, shady corporation who just want to kill everyone. Looks like the author of Lain lost his marbles. But hey, there are tentacles and philosophy. And the funeral of Cyberpunk wasn't declared by me in this video, it was declared by its own creator in 2001. Katsuhiro Otomo took the manga Metropolis and basically wrote another Akira. But as you can see, his eyes were already on something else. He created not Cyberpunk, but Dieselpunk, where globalization takes center stage. The movie flopped again. Poor Otomo. In 2002 someone had the genius idea to shove Cyberpunk into Chobits. Yeah, the anime about robots that turn on when you press their clitors. Yeah, everyone was embarrassed. Well, embarrassed but also enjoyed watching it, only to judge themselves later. But by then androids had become so everyday. It was better to call this ecchi, not Cyberpunk. And Cyberpunk just wasn't interesting anymore. Only Ghost in the Shell was still farming cash with its anime series. Then came some solid anime like Texhnolyze. Cool stuff, but nothing groundbreaking. Just reinterpretation of the old. The genre was dead. Fun for fans like me, sure, but no fresh air. And if Experiments Lain was this weird, cryptic show that aired mostly at night, for a very adult audience, Texhnolyze in my county was broadcast before the roosters even started crowing. At first episode nobody says a word. Total silence. But later episodes flip it completely. If you miss even a couple of lines, you'll lose the entire thread of the story. You'll understand nothing. And then 3 years later, the Cyberpunk fans woke up again. Home. Sweet home. Ergo Proxy. A detective story. A crime happens in the future. Real is sent to investigate. A mysterious stranger. A self-aware android. Battles. Atmosphere. And something that scared away the mass audience, but drew us closer, making you feel special. A super philosophical anime that can completely break its own narrative structure and throw in a nonsense episode with zero context. Cyberpunk in a post-apocalyptic setting, but different. You've escaped the cyberpunk city, left wandering the ruined world, seen a fallen civilization. And that episode where Real runs out of fuel, I think it's the most atmospheric in anime history. Pure everyday life against the chilling sounds of nature. So empty, so void, but fascinating to watch. Everyday life that's hollow, lifeless, but filled with life, you get it? From the neon chaos of the 80s to the post-apocalyptic loneliness of the 2000s. And we won't see the next digital universe for another 7 years in Sword Art Online. Or that clumsy Netflix reboot of Ghost in the Shell. The one that'll burn your eyes out, with none of the detail or soul of the originals left. Or wait for Cyberpunk Edgerunners, which by using the old ways, briefly breathed life back into the genre. As William Gibson once said, Cyberpunk died because it became everyday life. But I believe that Cyberpunk is dead because it lost its age. But thanks to technology, we managed to digitize its spirit, and even in the frozen wastelands, when we've run out of fuel, we'll still remember this genre with warmth in our chests.